good evening, everyone. I'm only 3 seconds late, so that's pretty good. I'm not a normal preacher or an ordained minister, so I just want everyone to be aware of that. But I'll do my best. We're going to go into Proverbs chapter 5. I haven't been in the class besides when Chad had the very first class in Proverbs, so I kind of had this for myself more than anybody. This is just the Bible Project's layout of the book of Proverbs. So up here we got, it's kind of hard to read for you guys, but you got Solomon and this little cartoon character, and he's the father of Israel's wisdom tradition, wisest man in the ancient world, and that's 1 Kings chapter 4. And then we got the first 9 chapters is kind of this section here. Chad went over, the introduction to Proverbs, chapter 1, and then we have Proverbs is for gaining wisdom, and wisdom is skill and applied knowledge. See Exodus 31. So this is kind of the introduction that Chad went over. We're kind of in this section right here, which is the 10 speeches from a father to a son. So Solomon speaking to his father. These little black things are kind of hard to read. They say, the moral logic of Proverbs is wisdom and fear of the Lord, virtue, integrity, and generosity, success and peace, folly and evil, selfishness and pride, ruin and shame. And then we had these 4 poems of the Lady Wisdom. Wisdom gets personified into a woman, and that was in the chapter that Chad taught, chapter 3, chapter 8, and chapter 9, which we haven't gotten into yet. And this here says Proverbs is not good advice, but Proverbs equals God's invitation to learn wisdom from previous generations. That's kind of hard to read. And I won't get into these sections, but this is chapters 10 through 29, chapter 30, chapter 31. I did like this little guy here. And it says, biblical wisdom literature, exploring how to live well in God's world. Wisdom is not law, thou shalt or thou shalt not, or prophecy, thus saith the Lord, but wisdom is the accumulated insight of God's people throughout generations. So that's kind of a layout of the book of Proverbs. Tonight we're going to be in Proverbs chapter 5, and I titled it, Guard Your Heart, Honor Your Covenant. Let's bow together, and I'll lead us in prayer. Heavenly Father, God, we pray that you be with us tonight. Help us to glean wisdom from chapter 5 of Proverbs. It's a difficult chapter, Lord. It speaks of sexual sin. It speaks of adultery. We can glean wisdom from it, and we prefer to learn things from your wisdom and then live our lives accordingly, opposed to living our lives and learning things the hard way. So we pray that you help us to do that. Give us wisdom. Just be with our hearts as we go through this passage and guide us in all things that we do. And in Jesus' name, amen. All right. Proverbs chapter 5. Down here, I don't know if you guys can read any of this. I didn't do a very good job. It says, keep your heart with all vigilance, for from it flow the springs of life. And that's from last week, Proverbs 4:23. Okay, so what's Proverbs 5 all about? You guys can kind of tell I like to break things down into sections, just how my brain works. And so I put a father's urgent, honest warning to his son. He's frank about temptation. He's unflinching about consequences. And it has a beautiful vision of covenant love in the second, in that 15 through 23. And so verses 1 through 6 is a seductive trap. So it's a portrait of this forbidden woman. Her lips are sweet like honey. Her speech is like smooth as oil. And Solomon doesn't describe her as your obvious movie villain that you see in the movies. She's very charming, she's attentive, and she's emotionally available. And the danger is gradual, and in the end, it's death. And then in verse 17 through 14, I probably said chapters before, verses 1 through 6, verses 17 through 14, I titled The Bitter Harvest. So ruin, regret, and public shame. So we got years lost, honors surrendered to others. We got wasted strength, wasted youth. It's a man who ignored wisdom, and he speaks in regret. He's not blaming anyone else, but he's confessing every step he freely chose. No glamour, only wreckage. And we know that Solomon had a lot of experience in this topic and a lot of experience in having, women distract him from his life. And this proverb is written, Solomon is speaking to his son, but it goes either way. I mean, it's speaking of a forbidden woman, but I'm definitely not up here trying to say that, all adultery is caused by women. I would love to say that, but it's just not the truth. And more, it used to be men committed more adultery than women. Now it's like, I looked it up on the stats and it was like 48-52. It's almost becoming even, but 50 years ago it was closer to, I don't remember, it was closer to 70% men were the ones that committed adultery. But we'll get onto all that later. And then the second part is really actually quite beautiful. It's verses 15 through 23, and that's a covenant renewal. Delight fully in your own spouse. And so Solomon's counteroffer is not mere duty, it's joy. Drink deeply from your own well. Let her love intoxicate you always. God sees every hidden path, and he designed marriage, love, to be good, generous, and holy, worth cultivating. All right, so we're going to do Proverbs chapter 5, verses 1 through 6. And in our Bible class in here, I always make the young guys read, so that's what I'm going to do. So Proverbs chapter 5, verse 1 through 6, the seductive trap. Was that you or Cody? I don't remember. All right, Cody, go for it. And I have it up here, too, if you guys want.
My son, be attentive to my wisdom. Incline your ear to my understanding, that you may keep discretion, and your lips may guard knowledge. For the lips of a forbidden woman drip honey, and her speech is smooth as oil. But in the end she is bitter as wormwood, sharp as a two-edged sword. Her feet go down to death, her steps follow the path to Sheol. She does not ponder the path of life, her ways wander, and she does not know it.
All right, great job. Okay, so this is our seductive trap. And in this instance, it's a woman, and she's forbidden. As I said earlier, her lips drip honey, her speech is smooth. You know, she says things that you want to hear. And so we're going to talk about this later in our class, but like, you know, if you have a husband or a wife, I've been picking it that way. Let's say you have a wife and her husband doesn't tell her how beautiful he is. He doesn't tell her he loves her. He doesn't tell her, you know, any of the things that we're supposed to tell our wives when she's out in the world or when she's with her friends, or, you know, when this speech that's smooth comes around, she's going to be way more susceptible to listening to it. And we're going to talk about that later. But this speech is smooth as oil. Wormwood is an herb. It's an herb, and so it's a very bitter herb. I thought it was actually a wood when I first read it, but it's an herb for whatever that means. And then this sharp as two-edged sword. This made me think of, I don't even know if it's true. It's kind of a parable. It's called the wolf trap, and I know that they actually did use this to trap wolves and kill wolves back in the day, but I don't know, you know, where it came from. It's an old Eskimo tale, but I'll read it quick. So this kind of reminded me of that two-edged sword. And so in the Arctic North, life is tough. Everything in life is more difficult due to the snow and rugged terrain, and maybe that's why animals grow so big up there. The moose are bigger, the bears are bigger, and so are the wolves. The largest wolves in recorded history prowl around in Alaska, Canada, and northern Asia. They stand almost 3 feet tall and can weigh 120 pounds, and they are pack hunters. And their prey almost never see the attack coming, and by then it's too late. They have a bite force of 400 pounds per square inch, enough to snap a bone in their mouths, and the dagger-like fangs that puncture and rend flesh as though it's paper. In times past, and still to this day, a farmer or shepherd with a wolf problem is in an incredibly dangerous situation, not only for their livestock, but for themselves as well. But hunting wolves is tricky. They stick to the shadows, and you will rarely ever see them in the open. They must be lured out. To kill a wolf, the farmer or hunter will first take their hunting knife and hone the blade until it's razor sharp. That's what made me think of that when it said sharper than a double-edged sword. He then takes blood from another animal, typically a rabbit or caribou, and he pours the blood on the knife and sets it outside his tent to freeze. He puts more blood, freezes it again, and continues this until he has a blood popsicle of sorts. Next, he takes the knife to a place where the wolves have been, and he buries the handle in the frozen ground so that the blood-coated blade is sticking up, and then he leaves. Under the cover of darkness, the wolf smells the blood. It entices him. It lures him. Kind of see where I'm going here. When the wolf finds the blood popsicle, he starts licking it. He can't help himself. He licks it faster and faster, numbing his tongue. Because of the numbness, he doesn't even notice that when his tongue first hits that razor-sharp blade. He continues to run it over the blade again and again, repeatedly cutting his tongue. But the taste of blood is still so strong, and he keeps going. So the hunter comes back the next morning to find the wolf dead next to the knife with its belly full of its own blood. This is my part here. That came from a section I got online, but this is what I said at the end. This is how adultery and porn traps us. This chapter doesn't really talk about porn, but it talks about sexual sin. So I just entered that in there. This is how adultery and porn traps us. It lures us with something that's tempting. When we are in a moment of weakness, our curiosity gets the best of us, and we start indulging in the passions of the flesh. It feels good at first, so we continue. We keep returning to that well of death and addiction. But what we don't realize is that along the way, we are numbing ourselves, and our conscience becomes so seared that the excuses comes all too easily. But the reality is that by coming back to that well, by continuing to lick that blood popsicle, we are killing ourselves, and the cycle of addiction only goes downward, and as well as the lies begin to permeate through our lives, and the damage begins to spread to our loved ones, our church, and our relationship with God. So that was just kind of a story that I had remembered a few years back that reminded me of that temptress, that first six verses. All right, so now we're in the second section, verses 7 through 14. All right, we'll talk about this section more later, but I think you guys all get the idea here of what, this bitter harvest that they're speaking of. And then Grant, we'll just finish out the chapter, and then we'll go back into it in a second, 15 through 23. All right, thank you guys. All right, so some of this stuff I got online, some of it I pulled, we'll see some biblical quotes in there, but this is just how adultery begins, the steps of temptation. I said adultery is rarely an explosion, but it's a slow leak. So it starts with an emotional drift. You're in a marriage, and I've been married for, 2003, 20-something years. My wife's not here, so it's okay. And, there's times in your marriage where you have this emotional drift. You're feeling unseen, you're feeling unheard, you're feeling disconnected, and, there's this quiet distance just kind of grows in your home, and often it's unspoken. There's a lot of times that even Steph and I will be like, a few months have gone by like this, and I'm like, man, I feel distant, like we need to go on a date night, we need to do something because I just have this emotional drift. And marriages go in and out of this part, and we're just not connecting anymore. That's what I write down here. And this is fine. This happens all the time in a marriage, but it leaves us vulnerable in those situations. And then we have this innocent contact. So I put a coworker, a friend, online acquaintance, somebody just gets it. Their attention feels refreshing. It's harmless. We're just friends. That's what we got down here. So we're just friends. It's no big deal. And then we have a step that goes into the emotional affair. So you start sharing things that you shouldn't share with anybody besides your spouse. And so you're talking, a lot of times you're talking about your spouse, or you're talking about work or your friend. You're being intimate in an emotional way with this person, and most of the time your spouse doesn't know about it. And so I can just tell them anything. That's what I got down here. It's kind of hard to see that. Now, as you can tell, our colors are starting to get a little redder, so we're getting into some difficult stuff here. So now the physical lines cross. After this long emotional buildup, and it rarely feels sudden to those that are inside of it, and it just happened. That's when the line crosses there, and then we're left with the devastating fallout, as the proverb says. Families fractured, shame, spiritual bankruptcy, and the cost touches every person connected to the marriage. And so that's kind of I actually got this from it was a marriage site, but it had anything to do with biblical stuff, but this was pretty common between most of those things. So this section here, I could put real life scenarios that we face today in our marriages. And so we got the work spouse, we got a colleague who listens, they appreciate you, and they gradually become, emotionally primary. They're there, and they fill that role that your spouse, should fill. Another option could be a social media reconnection. An ex resurfaces through a message or a friend request. The contact feels harmless at first. Nostalgia opens a door that's best kept closed. I've experienced this. I think for Steph and I, our first year was really tough in our marriage, and our 7th year was really tough. And I always say that. It's pretty common. For me, I had a friend reach out to me right around that 7-8 years of marriage and said, "Oh, I haven't seen you since high school. How you doing?" "Oh, I've been doing good. How are your kids?" "Oh, they're doing good." I said, "Are you married?" That's what she asked. "Question, you married? Question mark. Still married? Question mark." "Yeah." And then she just texted, "Happily?" Question mark. And it just clicked in my head. This isn't an innocent contact. And I didn't know, but she had since divorced and was in a bad situation. And so those things can happen. And so you just need to be, especially talking to young people and young couples, but you just need to be aware that an innocent social media connection can not be innocent in a short period of time. And so, I don't have Instagram. I think I still have an Instagram account, but I don't have really. I stay pretty much away from most social media, unless you call Bring a Trailer social media, which is like a website where you look at cars and stuff. It's pretty sweet. But I try to stay away from social media, just to avoid it. It's like the same thing with alcohol. Are we commanded not to drink? No, but I just stay away from it because I've seen the damages of it. And so adultery is very similar. You're best to keep your fences, as we talk about. It's best to keep your fences out, right? That's wisdom speaking. That's not commands, but that's wisdom. Pornography. It's a private habit that quietly rewires its desires away from your real spouse. It's creating unrealistic expectations and emotional distance. This is another thing that I've dealt with, and I dealt with basically until Sienna was born. And it's a struggle, and it causes a distance between your spouse. And so this isn't biblical stuff, but my personal advice of what's helped me, and we're going to talk about it later in our class tonight, is having a friend that you can talk to, and also being emotionally available and honest with your spouse. I felt when I was younger in our marriage, I never wanted to say that to my wife because it was humiliating. I didn't want to ruin what she thought about me. But in the end, it's way more important to be honest so you guys can work together. And also, when you have people think of pornography as just like a private habit that's not really affecting anybody. Yeah, it's a sin, but it's not really affecting. But it does cause a distance in your marriage that you don't really notice until it's gone. You don't notice it because, just in everything, we're going to talk about this later too, but I keep saying that, but with your phone. I don't care if my wife grabs my phone. She knows all my passwords. I don't care if she grabs my phone or if she gets on, hey, can I use your computer? I don't care. But when you're looking at things that you're not supposed to, she's like, hey, I'm going to grab your computer. You're like, oh, I hope she doesn't see something, and it's you just have this, there's just a barrier in that intimacy between you and your wife that wouldn't be there if that sin wasn't involved. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that later. I know this chapter isn't talking about pornography, but it has that sexual sin idea. And adultery, Jesus says if you've lusted after a woman in your heart, then you've committed adultery, so that's kind of how that pornography fits in there. And then our next scenario that I kind of picked, I just picked these out of the blue just from what I've personal experience and from what I studied. Emotional neglect at home. So feeling invisible, unheard. We kind of talked about that earlier. And that outside warmth is magnetic. The unmet emotional needs become open to vulnerability. And so I know, we kind of hit on this earlier, but if the husband is getting ready to go to work, or he's getting ready, my wife is great at this. She tells me all the time, you're so great, and she's always just building me up all the time. You look so good, and I know I don't, but I don't care. She's still she's building me up, and it makes me feel good. And so when I go out into the world, and a woman says something to me, or you have this sweeter than, smoother than oil and sweeter than honey type person comes up and gives you some compliment, I don't care because I already get that from my wife, and I love, and that's who I want it from. That's what I love. But when you have a wife that's constantly nagging her husband and telling him how much of a loser he is, and that you don't do this right, you don't do that right, when he goes out into the world, there's going to be someone that's going to tell him that they like him because they don't live with him. They don't see him with his dirty underwear on the ground, and so they think he's great, and so they build him up into this great person, and that's when he goes, after that person. And so just something to think about that Helen told me, and then Steph and I did marriage counseling with Cal and Kim when we first got married, and they both told us the same thing, that you make the spouse, if you don't like your spouse, the spouse is who you create. That you can't overdo building up your spouse and telling them how much you love them and giving them that confidence in your relationship. So just something to think about of that, stay away from that emotional neglect. This is obviously something that we should stay away from, late night texting. You have friends of the opposite sex in, all hours of the night texting, and that should be a warning sign. We should totally, obviously, stay away from that. And then couple, friends, or family. So we have like Stephanie and I are friends with some friends out in Sultan, Sean and Dina, and we've been friends with Kayla and JP for years. And you have these friends, and a lot of times those relationships can get inappropriate. And same thing with family. Like a lot of times your in-laws to your marriage, or just different people in your family. I'm not talking incest, that's disgusting, but just different relationships in the family can get gross and get totally out of hand. And so we want to totally avoid that and stay away from them. And so I put on the bottom, none of these begins as obvious sin. Each begins as small. They're a reasonable step away from the covenant, though. All right, so let's get back to that 7 through 14. I said we'd get back to it. So the bitter harvest. And this is verses 12 through 14. You want to read that, Dad? I didn't ask you to, but now I'm going to. Verses 12 through 14. Just make sure you're staying awake back there. Yep. Awesome. Thank you. So these verses obviously, record a man living in massive regret. It's too late. He's already made the mistake. But the text gives adultery no glamour, but only wreckage, which is the truth of it. Proverbs, we're going to be reading Proverbs for a while, and Proverbs is seeing the end of something. Wisdom is seeing the end of something at the beginning. Like if David and Bathsheba, if David would have seen the end when it started, and he would have seen the death of his child, he would have seen his reputation ruined. If he would have seen at the end of it, at the beginning, like the Christmas Carol, the movie The Christmas Carol, he sees 50 years in the future. If we're there, we would never make the mistake. Like we obviously would. I don't want to be in that situation. And so that's something to really think about, because the real cost of adultery is real. So 60 to 65% of marriages are touched by infidelity. This doesn't necessarily mean adultery. It can mean emotional affairs. It can mean inappropriate texting. It can mean different things, but 60 to 65% of our marriages are going to be touched by infidelity. 70% of marriages that have confirmed adultery in them end in divorce. That's a lot, and it's actually like 74%. This was a year ago. It says, rarely a quiet unraveling, always a catastrophic fracture. And the average adultery relationship lasts 2 years, which is a lot longer than I would have thought. Before they're discovered, they last 2 years. So it's got seasons of compounding deception and damage. And most importantly, 100% of it is seen by God. There's no secret in his sight. And that's from Proverbs 5:21 there. All right, so let's get some practical boundaries that will help protect your marriage, or for you guys, your future marriages. I love this rule. Scott and Jenna, held by this rule, and even a little bit more so, which I'll explain in a minute. But this is the Billy Graham rule. You never meet alone with somebody of the opposite sex. Like Scott would do counseling, he would never do counseling with a female. I don't care if she's 82 years old, she would never do counseling with a female without Jenna in the room. And I think that's just a smart thing to do. Some people can say it's a little extreme. Steph and I actually don't abide by this rule. Stephanie does reffing and different things with umpires, and so a lot of times she'll be having dinner with an ump or a ref that she knows. They're usually in their 70s, so I'm not too scared. But I do. She's honest with me, and she tells me all the time. So I do keep an eye on it, because I want to be watching her. But we don't abide by this rule, but it's a great rule. And another thing that Scott and Jenna do, which I think is great, is they've never had a night apart from each other. So it takes a lot of commitment. I know my mom's sister, Tara, has done the same thing with her husband, and they've just never had a night apart. They just make sure to make it a point. If Scott goes on a lectureship down in Florida, he takes his whole family, he takes Jenna with him. And so there's things that we can do that can protect our marriage. Is kind of the idea between these 6 things that I picked here. Like I talked about before, phone transparency. Share your passwords, no hidden apps. You have open communication between your phones and your computers. And so it's a gift that you can give to your spouse. Name that feeling. This is something that my kids are well aware of, and it's actually my dad's fault because he's this way, and he taught me this way. But you talk about your feelings. So if I've told my wife 100 times, if you have feelings for somebody, or you think somebody's attractive, or you're feeling pulled to somebody, like, I want you to feel comfortable to talk to me about it, because I'm not in a Cinderella story idea in my brain where I think that I'm the only man for you and I'm the only man that you're ever going to be attracted to in my life. I know that she's going to have connections with other people, but I just want her to be honest with me and to not feel uncomfortable about sharing how she feels about certain things. And that's not just in our marriage. I've expounded that into my kids, how I talk to my kids. My dad was very instrumental in that when I was growing up. Like, he would make some very bad mistakes. I'm not going to smear him in front of everybody here because he's a great guy, but he'd make some bad mistakes, and he'd come to us, bring the family in, and be like, hey, I just want you guys to know I'm an idiot. This is what I did. This is how it is. And he was just honest, and it just was refreshing. Like, I never expected, my dad to be this perfect person, and he was totally transparent in his faults and would ask for forgiveness. And I think that's important in our marriage. And then this one I'm working on. So this is in the end, I'm going to ask you guys some questions about what we need to do and what we're working on. This is what I'm going to be working on, because I suck at this. So date nights, couple retreats, ongoing emotional intimacy. Love is just not just the feeling. It's a practice that we need to cultivate. It's that garden we need to cultivate. So I just am not good at this. And one of the things that I need to do better too, I'm going to talk about this in a minute, is getting off of our phones. Like, when I go to bed with my wife, there shouldn't be TV, and we shouldn't have our phones in bed. We both still do, because we go to bed, get on the phones. I'm checking out cars. She's watching, like Hidden River or some weird Hallmark movie. And so we just sitting there watching our phones. It's a horrible habit to get into. And the more I've studied this, the more I realize that that's robbing us of some intimacy that we could be having at that time. And so this is something I'm going to really try to do better at. Guard the front door of the mind. So really monitor what you watch, what you read, what we consume online. A desire is shaped by input. Protect the gateway of the imagination daily. So that's something else that's another practical boundary that we can protect our marriage with. And then accountability relationships. I had a friend that I worked with for 10 years named Casey. He just lives up the road, really nice guy. And I'm more like a bigger brother to him. And I was really he was able to help me too, but I was really able to help him become accountable to me. And when he's struggling with something, he can call me. And it's helped him to be more open and transparent with his wife to really get over the different issues that we were talking about before. And so that really helps us to be open in our relationship. And so at the bottom here, Proverbs 5:21, we already read it, but for a man's ways are before the eyes of the Lord, and he ponders all of his paths. Okay, we're getting close here. So, all right, emotional and spiritual dimensions of faithfulness. So things that draw us away. This is just a review of what I've already talked about. Things that draw us away in our marriage, and things that help us keep anchored. So something that draws us away is when we feel unseen, unheard in our own home, right? We talked about that. Craving novelty or excitement outside the marriage. That can be through inappropriate relationships, pornography, adulterous relationships, whatever it is. Unresolved anger or bitterness that's left to fester. Isolation from your spouse. This can be physical or emotional distance, but that distance that we're talking about. And then secret struggles with lust that are left unconfessed. I really encourage you guys and those that haven't been married yet to be open and honest in your relationship. If you're struggling with something, like, your wife will understand or your husband will understand. All right, what keeps us anchored? Daily spiritual surrender to God in prayer. This is something I just have to keep. It seems so simple, but it's something I have to keep reminding myself. And it's also very awkward for me to pray with my wife. We've gotten better at it. We did a marriage conference thing that Stacy headed up like a year ago, and the people were talking about intimacy and different things, and they're like, after you're intimate, it's totally comfortable, like, or before, to pray to God and like invite God into your bedroom. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, that's disgusting. And because I have this block between sexual relationship and God, because I keep forgetting that God, created sex for us to enjoy in our marriage. But I just have that block for some reason in my head that no, sex is bad, God is good, and they have to be separated. And so that idea of being prayerful with your spouse really makes a huge impact in keeping you anchored, and it really helps your wife to feel comfortable and led in a way that I have found to work really well. All right, being honest and emotional about communication with your spouse. We already talked about that. Community accountability, we talked about that. Friends that are going to ask you hard questions. You can get that accountability partner, someone that you're comfortable talking with of the same sex, obviously. And then renewing attraction through intentional investment. We kind of talked about that already. So date nights, just that intimate time of talking with one another, like just having that time set aside where you guys can just, do something. And it doesn't have to be anything stupid. I was trying to practice what I preach. And so this week I asked Stephanie, said, hey, do you want to come over and play Uno with me at the table? Like, away from our phones, just play Uno. It's a stupid game, but it causes us to talk, and because it's a game you don't have to think about, right? And so it's like 20 minutes later, I could tell it made a difference in me, and I could tell it made a difference in her, just having that time that we, don't always have. And then remembering the covenant that we've made before God. That helps us stay anchored. Okay, so drink water from your own cistern, flowing water from your own well. Let your fountain be blessed, and rejoice in the wife of your youth. Let her breast fill you at all times and delight, and be intoxicated always in her love. So this is striking sensual language, intentionally so. God designed erotic love with marriage as good, generous, and worth cultivating. We talked about that already. And the antidote to adultery is not suppression of desire, but a redirected delight, investing that energy into the person that you married. All right, so this is where I ask you guys a few questions. This is my notes. Everyone makes fun of me in my class in here because my notes are all on wood, but it helps me, and I always take my notes while I'm working in the shop. So let's make sure I got everything. There was one story I thought that was funny. This lady has a man with really bad health issues. So he goes into the doctor. They go into the ER, and he takes a bunch of tests, And so he's in the waiting room. The doctor calls in the wife and says, your husband's going to die if we don't do these two things. He needs to have 3 warm meals a day, and you need to have sexual relations with him every night for the next 30 days. So the wife goes into the room, says, sorry, honey, but it's terminal and you're going to die. Thought that was a pretty funny story. Let's see if I got anything else on my notes here. Joseph and Potiphar's wife, that was a good example of fleeing and running. And then, go ahead. I appreciate that. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Hmm. Yeah. 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 The cost is real. And I was actually going to touch on that earlier, but the cost is beyond the spiritual and the emotional distress. And I have, I know that adultery has affected many people in the church, outside of the church, and I don't, I don't go over this chapter lightly. I know, and I have great respect for, especially for couples that have persevered and have gone. I mean, that shows true forgiveness and true, perseverance, and it's affected me and my family. Not me and Steph particularly, but in our family, and there's just there's a lot of shame, there's a lot of hidden things involved, and I basically kind of put this lesson together really more for the young couples and the young people that are going to be getting married. Not to say that when you're older, adultery can't be there, but weirdly enough, when I was looking up all these stats, the fastest rising cases of adultery are between 60 and 80-year-olds, which is really weird, but I didn't look into it why. But yeah, good point. There's a lot of risk of why to stay infatuated with the wife or husband of your youth. All right. So I just had a few questions for you guys, and these aren't necessarily questions you need to answer from the pews, but you're welcome to if you want. But what condition in your marriage causes you to feel more vulnerable to outside emotional connection? Like I talked about before, like that time where you're feeling distant with your wife or husband and you're not talking well. Like those are kind of the things I was thinking of. If anything else that anyone has any ideas, you're welcome to say them. If you don't, I'll go to the next question. I'm not pressuring you guys. All right. Have you ever been surprised by an attraction to someone outside of your marriage, and what did you do with this? I'm not going to ask you guys this question because I don't. That's personal, but for me, I have been, and you just with Joseph, and not with David. David didn't do this, but with Joseph and Potiphar's wife, you just have to flee. Like you just have to, and you have to avoid them before they come. So if you're a guy in a management position and you have to hire a secretary, and you have a young, beautiful model secretary come in and apply for the job, and you have I don't want to hurt people's feelings, an unattractive woman come in for the job, and a motherly figure come in, like a 70-year-old woman come in for the job, and they're all equally qualified, I would strongly suggest to pick the motherly figure just to avoid that situation. The beautiful woman will find a job, she'll be all right. Like, it's not your responsibility, but, that's just practical ideas, right? What boundaries do you and your spouse have in place or need to put in place to protect your marriage? Like that Billy Graham rule, different things. Open phone line communications. If you guys have any other boundaries that work well for your marriage, you're welcome to talk or raise your hand anytime. I don't require any formal hand raising, but you're welcome to say whatever you want. In what ways have you drifted emotionally from your spouse, and what could you do this week to reconnect? I kind of, shared my personal thoughts on that with the phone time at night. Like, that's something that my wife and I just slowly kind of drifted into a habit of going to bed and clicking on the old phones and not really talking. And that's just extremely damaging in my opinion. All right, so guarding our hearts and moving forward. We've got a few minutes here. How do you guard the door of your mind, what you watch, consume, or entertain in your daily life? Like, if anyone has any. Yep. 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 Yeah. Amen to that. Yep. Great point. Yep. Yeah. 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 Yep. Yep. For sure. All right. Do you have an accountability relationship with someone who can ask you hard questions, and what do you guys think that would look like? For me, it was my friend Casey, and I'm more his accountability friend than he is to me, but we were 10 years apart, and so I could see where his life was turning, because it was the same direction that same struggles I was going through, so it was easy for me to help him. But a lot of times this can look, family, or it can be just a friend that you have that you can not be, bashing or inappropriately talking about your spouse, but just that you can be accountable with somebody, which in turn, in my opinion, helps you to be more accountable with your spouse, which is the end goal, in my opinion. I'm not telling you guys how to live your marriages, but I think a completely open, marriage emotionally is the best. But, this is something to think about. All right. What does rejoicing in the spouse of your youth look like practically in your current season of life? Comments? Questions? That's all right. You guys don't have to answer. I was just wondering. What is one thing you want to do differently starting today? So for me, that's that phone thing. Tonight, I already told my wife, we're not on our phones tonight for at least 15 minutes. And it doesn't have to be all night, but at least 15 minutes. We're going to sit there, and I don't care if it's just complete silence. I'll lead a prayer or something, but it's going to be, that's my thing that I'm going to do differently. That's going to try to hopefully grow us closer and continue to grow closer in God. Anyone else have any questions? Yeah. Yeah, that's a smart thing. Yep. Yep. One thing I suck at is telling my wife how I feel, and my kids. Man, I suck at it. My dad was really good at that. He was always like, hey, I'm really proud of you for such and such reason, and this and this and this. And he was always just really good about expressing his feelings. I think a lot of good things about my kids and my wife and different family members. I just never say them, and I just have never figured out why. So sometimes I have to purposely, I'll think in my head, that was, something really nice, or my wife looks really good, or whatever it is, I'll think in my head, and then I don't. So I have to really get my mind to connect with my mouth and say it. And I can see it since I don't say it ever, I can see it oh, thank you, that's so nice. But I don't know, for some reason, something I'm working at. All right, so this is our final slide here. So 3 commitments: pray for and with your spouse. Name one boundary to establish or strengthen, and find one way to achieve delight in your spouse. And I just put at the bottom, the study is not about shame, it's about choosing the life Proverbs promises to those who walk in wisdom. All right, thank you guys for your attention.